Hello there. You're watching World News program on All 24 News with me, Karim Zachary. Coming up next are your headlines. Zionist police officers charged up Palestinian mourners carrying the coffin of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. The President of the Algerian Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, presented his condolences to the United Arab Emirates following the death of a Zionist, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed, following an announcement by UAE of entering 40-day period of mourning. A 21-year-old Russian soldier has gone on trial on Friday in Ukraine for war crimes after he was accused of killing a Ukrainian civilian. And finally, you'll be watching in our news. According to Indian emergency services and local media, an accidental fire killed 27 people. Hello again, those were today's top stories, and first we kick it off from Palestine. Zionist police officers charged at Palestinian mourners carrying the coffin of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh on Friday before thousands led her casket through Jerusalem's Old City in an outpouring of grief and anger over her killing. Marwa Bilaiwa reports.
The US and EU led an international outcry Saturday after Zionist police officers assaulted mourners at the funeral procession of the prominent Palestinian-American journalist killed this week in the occupied West Bank, forcing pallbearers to nearly drop the coffin.
We've urged respect for the funeral procession, the mourners, and the family at this sensitive time. We're also in close touch with Israeli and Palestinian authorities, have been and obviously will continue to be, especially given the images we've seen today. We're not currently involved in any of the investigation, but we are working to bridge cooperation and available to provide assistance as needed.
Video showed police officers in Al-Quds beating and kicking pallbearers carrying the coffin that contained the body of Shireen Abu Akleh, striking other mourners with batons and forcing people to the ground. During the eruption, the pallbearers were pushed backward, causing them to briefly lose control of one end of the coffin. The incident occurred outside the hospital in occupied East Quds, where mourners had gathered to take the coffin of the Christian journalist to a nearby church for her funeral. The United States said it was deeply troubled by the scenes, while the European Union said it was appalled by the unnecessary force.
Those images, they're obviously deeply disturbing. This is a day where we should all be marking, including everyone there, the memory of a remarkable journalist who lost her life. We know that there is, with the disturbing footage from the funeral procession today in Jerusalem, we regret the intrusion into what should have been a peaceful procession.
The funeral was attended by thousands of people and came a day after state memorial service was held in West Bank city of Ramallah. At the service, mourners stood at the courtyard of Palestinian Authority's presidential headquarters to praise and bid farewell to a person many Palestinians consider a trailblazing journalist. The United States, European Union, and United Nations have backed calls for a full investigation into Abu Akleh's killing. Grief over Abu Akleh's killing split beyond the Palestinian territories, while protests erupting in Turkey, Sudan, and elsewhere.
The EU delegation to the Palestinians tweeted that it was appalled by the use of unnecessary force by Zionists at the funeral in Jerusalem of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Norway's ambassador to Zionist entity added to worldwide condemnation to the attack. Carreras tweeted he was shocked by the violence conducted by the Zionist forces. Still with world reaction, the United Nations Security Council has unanimously condemned the killing of Palestinian-American Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in the occupied West Bank. The UN's Human Rights Office also called for a probe into the killing, saying it might constitute a war crime. And the UN conveyed their sympathy and deepest condolences. and called for an immediate, thorough, transparent, and fair and impartial investigation to our killing. The United Nations Security Council reiterated that journalists should be protected just as civilians. Still with the same topic, Zionist government claimed that the bullet that killed Abu Akleh while covering a Zionist raid in the occupied West Bank town of Jenin came from a Palestinian gunfire, while initial investigation says it was fired from an Israeli gun, as the broadcaster and a reporter who was wounded in the incident put the blame on the Zionist forces. Zionist forces kept denying the crimes and blaming Palestinians, yet there was no evidence on their claims. Lamenting the absence of the key piece of evidence that could determine if it was a Zionist soldier who fired, the Zionist investigation could not determine who fired the bullet yet. To Russia-Ukraine file now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned of the consequences of the end of sanctions against Russia and called for increased military and financial aid to Kyiv.
А якими можуть бути наслідки такого?
What will be the consequences of such hunger? What kind of political instability and migratory flows will it cause? How much we need to spend to overcome all these repercussions? These are the questions that should be answered by those suspending sanctions against Russia or trying to delay aid to Ukraine.
Або намагається відкласти надання допомоги Україні. Я вдячний усім, хто працює.
I'm grateful to those who are currently working to strengthen sanctions against Russia and increase military and financial aid to us, to Ukraine. This is the only recipe for defending freedom during the war, the invasion of Russia. It's not just about spending for Western countries. It's not about financial matters. It's about the future.
Про майбутнє.
The G7 ensured that Ukraine remains one of the world's major grain exporters, despite Russia's special operation. Discussions are underway about this and how to break the ban on exporting crops to the world. Hossam Burkan reports.
On the second day of the G7 meeting, foreign ministers pledged their support for Ukraine until victory against Russia, while the European Union announced 500 million euros in additional military aid to Kyiv. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba says he asked the G7 industrialized countries to confiscate Russian assets that will be used for the reconstruction of his country.
And today I asked G7 countries to adopt legislation and put in place all necessary procedures needed to seize Russian sovereign assets and give them to Ukraine. Give them to Ukraine for Ukraine to use this money to rebuild our country.
In turn, the G7 agriculture ministers sought Friday with their Ukrainian counterpart solutions to counter food insecurity. Otherwise, everyone will pay the price, according to Kyiv.
We talked about how we can help save the harvest as much as possible, by land, rail, or via the Danube. It is a strategy of Vladimir Putin to use hunger as a weapon of war in Ukraine and beyond. Ukrainians have experienced this in the past in the Soviet Union, during the Holodomor.
The West is now open to the idea of using frozen Russian central bank capital to help rebuild Ukraine, an option that might escalate tensions even more with Russia that receives almost $1 billion a day from selling energy to Europe.
Every human being whom you can help.
As the conflict in Ukraine continues and sanctions against Russia tighten, agricultural production costs are likely to rise still further. Ukraine is one of the world's biggest exporters of wheat, but the war is having an impact on the country's agriculture and food supplies, sparking fears of shortages or higher prices around the world. Nabil Khazini with more.
Ukraine's borders with Poland have been an open route for the refugees who fled the country. But in the same place, more than 20,000 wagons loaded mainly with wheat and oil are blocked. Since the start of the conflict in Ukraine, 25 million tons of grain have been waiting to leave the country. The crisis there is having a major impact on world food security, as Russia and Ukraine are vital to global food production.
Countries, perhaps in Poland, in Bulgaria, they spend a larger share of their income on food. They'll be much more influenced by this more expensive food. So I guess Southern Europe and also Africa, indeed, Egypt, the Arab countries, they are also huge importer of grain. They will face perhaps a lack of supply and also much more expensive grain. So they will really suffer, these countries.
According to an analysis, wheat production in Ukraine is likely to be at least a third lower than in normal years. The Ukrainian ports are now blocked. Hence, Ukraine can export only 1.5 million tons of agricultural products a month. In the heart of the war-torn east of Ukraine, meanwhile, this family is still attached to their native village. Here, Oksana still relies on the 26 cows that feed her sister and her 2 little children.
I can't make a living without the cows. You can't move around with them. It's impossible. I really hope that if someone starts shooting and sees us, their hands will shake and they'll decide not to shoot. Who knows what goes through some people's heads?
The conflict in Ukraine is having a major impact globally and inside the country. The stable milk income for this family means that Oksana cannot leave her land to flee the fighting without losing her entire herd.
A 21-year-old Russian soldier went on trial on Friday in Ukraine for war crimes after he was accused of killing a Ukrainian civilian. The young defendant was accused of murdering an unarmed old civilian, marking the first case of a Russian soldier being accused of war crimes since the beginning of the military operation. Vadim Shisim faces life imprisonment if found guilty. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan expressed Friday his opposition to the membership of Finland and Sweden to NATO, at the risk of blocking the whole process, which requires the unanimity of the members of the Atlantic Alliance. Once the decision has been taken by a third country to join, the members of NATO must in fact agree unanimously to invite it to join them.
We are currently following the developments regarding Sweden and Finland, but we don't have a positive opinion on this, because they made a mistake in NATO regarding Greece before, the administrations before us. And you know the attitude that Greece has taken against Turkey by siding with NATO. We, Turkey, do not want to make a second mistake on this issue. In addition, the Scandinavian countries, unfortunately, are almost like guest houses for the terrorist organizations of PKK and DHKPC, which are nestled in Sweden and Netherlands.
I have been in a regular contact with my Turkish colleague, Minister Çavuşoğlu, during this spring. I have been visiting twice Turkey during the spring, and actually I have an opportunity to meet with my counterpart, probably also tomorrow in Berlin, and then continue our discussion. I think we need some patience in this type of processes, and it's not happening in one day. This is all what I can say at the moment. Let's take issues step by step.
Finnish Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto has downplayed fears that Turkey could block Finland's NATO membership bid. Sweden and Finland plan to talk with Turkey on Saturday in Berlin after Turkish President Erdogan's hostility to their membership into NATO.
In a regular contact with my Turkish colleague, Minister Çavuşoğlu, during this spring. I have been visiting twice Turkey during the spring, and actually I have an opportunity to meet with my counterpart, probably also tomorrow in Berlin, and then continue our discussion. I think we need some patience in this type of processes, and it's not happening in one day. This is all what I can say at the moment. Let's take issues step by step.
Stockholmers reacted to Sweden's possible entry into NATO, as the latest polls showed that half of the approximately 10 million Swedes are now in favor of joining the alliance. This comes as many Scandinavian countries started considering joining NATO as a result of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine.
Well, we need to anchor it with the people, if I would say so. To make such a big decision in such few days could be, I don't know what the outcome will be of that.
I'm not quite sure about it myself. I try to understand what's the best, but I trust in my government. I have to trust in the government to make the right decisions.
Yeah, so I think, personally, I think that protection is important for every country, you know. But at the same time, being a NATO member comes with certain responsibilities as well. Of course, you'd have to perhaps accept the fact that you are no longer independent in military questions. You have to.
Russia announced it will cut electricity supplies to Finland. This comes as tensions rise over Helsinki's a NATO bid. Russian energy supplier said it would suspend deliveries of electricity to Finland from Saturday. The energy company cited problems with payments. Meanwhile, Finland said Russia provided only a small percentage of the country's electricity, which could be replaced from other sources. The United States hails new era with ASEAN as summit is committing to raise level of ties. Many cooperation projects and topics were tackled during the second day of the summit. Miriam Ziyan has more.
On Friday, the leaders of the United States and the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations declared that they will elevate their relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership this November. The U.S. President Joe Biden said that the ASEAN summit marked the launch of a new era in the relations between the U.S. and the 10-nation bloc.
We're not only celebrating 45 years of partnership and friendship between ASEAN and the United States, we're launching a new era in U.S.-ASEAN relations.
The summit marked the first time ASEAN leaders gathered as a group in Washington and their first meeting hosted by a U.S. president since 2016. Vice President Kamala Harris said that the United States would remain in Southeast Asia for generations and stressed the need to maintain freedom of the seas, which the U.S. says is challenged by China. Many topics were tackled in the summit, and the American president announced another $150 million to deepen the relations of the two parties and achieve more.
Discussions have covered a broad range of critical issues, including working together to keep up the fight against COVID-19, to take climate action, pursue a clean energy future, build a sustainable high-standard infrastructure, and to expand access to education, enhance maritime cooperation. And the breadth of discussions reflect just how vital the Indo-Pacific and ASEAN region are to the United States of America from our perspective.
And on Ukraine, the Southeast nations reaffirmed respect for sovereignty, political independence for the country, but this special summit ended without condemnation of the Russian special military operation, despite Biden's attempt to persuade ASEAN countries to toughen their stance. Biden's administration hopes the effort will show that the U.S. remains focused on the Indo-Pacific and the long-term challenge of China, which it views as its main competitor.
According to Sana News Agency, a rocket attack on a military bus has killed 10 soldiers and injured 9 others in the west of Aleppo province on Friday morning. The death toll is marked as the highest reported since a peace agreement signed by Russia and Turkey in March 2022. However, there was no claim or immediate claim of responsibility for the attack. The UAE's Federal Supreme Council has elected Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan as the president of the UAE. The official announcement followed a meeting held on Saturday at Al Mushrif Palace in Abu Dhabi. Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan becomes the 3rd president in the country's history. The United Arab Emirates entered a 40-day period of mourning with private and public workplaces taking a 3-day break from Friday. Condolences and tributes are pouring in from around the world to UAE as the UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan passed away yesterday. The President of the Algerian Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, on his part, presented his condolences to the United Arab Emirates following the death of His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed. The permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Ambassador Nadir Larbawi, as well as representatives of countries participating in the annual seminar of the UN Committee of 24 on the colonization issues, reiterated the urgent need to complete decolonization process of Western Sahara. The right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination was reaffirmed by the overwhelming majority of the participants of the three flagship regions of the fight against colonialism: Africa, Asia, and Latin America, who intervened during the session, devoted the issue of Western Sahara. North Korea reported 21 additional deaths and 174,440 new cases of fever symptoms on Saturday, as the country works to limit the spread of COVID-19 among its unvaccinated population. Amid the fast outbreak of the pandemic since late April, the country's death cases reached 27, in addition to more than 240,000 infections, where 280,810 recovered people are still in isolation. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un termed the outbreak as historically big disturbance and appealed for unity between the government and the people to stabilize the epidemic as soon as possible. According to Indian emergency services and local media, an accidental fire killed 27 people and more than 40 were injured in an accidental fire which erupted in a 4-floor commercial building in western Delhi on Friday, where about 70 people were rescued from the building. Around 30 fire trucks and ambulances were spotted on the scene. Prime Minister Narendra Modi shared his condolences to the victims' loved ones via Twitter page, writing that he is deeply saddened by the loss of human lives due to a tragic fire in Delhi. Somalia will seek new elections, seeking a new leader to the country under tight security in Mogadishu, after 15 months later than the original schedule of February 2021. Islam Said with more.
After months of delays, Somalia will hold a long-awaited presidential election on Sunday. The vote will determine who should lead the nation, which has been fighting several crises, including rebels, insurgents, and severe droughts, which hit the country very hard.
This presidential election marks the end of all the political ambiguity created by the former president of Somalia. There has been a high number of presidential candidates because first, there are no political parties in Somalia. If there are no parties, the election is open to everyone. And the second point is that it gives a chance to people who have no particular leadership skills.
In terms of leadership quality,
Somalia has not held a one-person, one-vote election in 50 years. 39 candidates were registered for the election and promised to tackle Somalia's numerous problems and bring relief to the country.
The country is very polarized at the moment, and you're expecting that whoever comes in will work towards reuniting the country.
The outgoing head of state, Mohammed Abdullahi Mohammed, is running for re-election after his mandate expired in February 2021. The Prime Minister Mohammed Hussein Rebel was then asked to carry out the votes, the process which had developed painfully and delayed by conflicts between the central government and certain states.
I really believe because of Farmajo's presidency, people are looking for more familiar candidates and not any newbies, people who have not governed or do not understand the Somali context. So for sure, this will be a change. People will not go for a new face. They will definitely go for old faces, people that they recognize, people that they feel they're more comfortable with. And in terms of front runners, this would be the two former presidents, the former prime minister and the president of Puntland. Those are the ones who you would hear suggested as the possible front runners against Farmajo.
The winning candidate must secure the backing of 2/3 of parliament, which means a minimum of 184 votes. The United Nations, the United States and the African Union urge Somali leaders to conclude this last stage of the electoral process quickly, peacefully, incredibly, so that the attention can turn to national priorities and state building. Graft is still a concern in Somalia, which ranks 178 out of 180 countries in Transparency International's World Corruption Index. This election will also be crucial for the economic future of Somalia, of which 71% of the population lives extreme poverty.
Lebanese presidency said in a statement that President Michel Aoun on Friday called on security agencies and judicial bodies to arrest bribers and the bribed over the upcoming parliamentary elections. Aoun said he was informed that some candidates are taking advantage of the difficult economic and social conditions to bribe voters during his meeting at Babda Palace with the European Union Election Observation Mission, tasked with monitoring the upcoming elections scheduled on Sunday. The world's richest person, Elon Musk, declared on Friday that his $44 billion plan to purchase Twitter is temporarily on hold, pending details on spam and fake accounts on the platform. The tweet is another sign of internal turmoil over proposed acquisition. The businessman reiterated his commitment to acquire the social network, but the market questioned his real intentions. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our program draws to a close. Thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.